Hi, I'm Andrew, the young adult and media librarian at North Brunswick Public Library. After 400 years, what is it about Shakespeare? Why are we still reading them? Why are we forcing our children to read to them, to try to conquer all the these and thous and other relics of forgotten language? Well, why is it that every sitcom has an episode that seems based on one of the plays in some way? Why do we have Broadway musicals and comics and horror movies, movies from all around the world based on Shakespeare plays? Now, some will tell you, oh, it's the great language. It's the great sense of characterization. His Shakespeare's ability to express any emotion you could possibly think of. And then you'll have other voices saying, wait a minute, 400 years ago, the guy's not going to be very PC, right? The plays don't necessarily, is this play really going to speak to us in the 21st century? Well, this new book, That Way Madness Lies, 15 of Shakespeare's most notable works reimagined, features 15 stories based mostly on plays and one sonnet by Shakespeare, with a modern point of view, with an eye towards diversity. The editor, Dahlia Adler, she edited a similar book a couple of years ago of modern versions of Poe tales, called His Hideous Heart. And she gathered these authors who write for YA from a variety of their own backgrounds as well as a variety of genres. So we'll have horror versions of Julius Caesar and Hamlet, right? Or A.R. Capetta and Corey McCarthy have Much Ado About Nothing, taking place among an acting troupe currently in outer space. By the way, the story could just as easily take place on Earth, but having in outer space does add a fun element to it. Now, Dahlia Adler herself also wrote a story based on The Merchant of Venice, which for me has always been a problematic play, because here you have the sympathetic characters are the anti-Semites who are very cruel to Shylock, the Jewish character. So when Shylock gets the opportunity for revenge, you really can't blame him, at least entirely, from a modern perspective. In Shakespeare's day, maybe you could have just booed Shylock. But Dahlia Adler's version of the character, who's a high school student from a traditional family, is a sympathetic character. So because she is able to take that modern view of that. Another fun one is Anna Marie McLemore takes the forgotten character, one who could be completely off stage, of A Midsummer Night's Dream, and focuses on that character, how that character is as a teenager, right? So really creating a sequel to A Midsummer Night's Dream. Generally, if Shakespeare wrote a play as a romantic comedy, the version that's in this book also plays out as a romantic comedy, just maybe a little less heteronormative, as they say. And if it was a tragedy, if Shakespeare wrote it as a tragedy, then the modern version in this anthology could be very serious. It could be a tragedy or just a serious drama, or even a horror tale. Joy McCullough takes King Lear, the story of a king at the end of his life and his three daughters, and writes a play about three modern daughters of a man who is not literally a king, but holds a lot of sway in the world at the end of his life, and looks at how they act. And I think it's a bit more sympathetic to the daughters than Shakespeare's King Lear was. Let's see, and most of the plays that are given modern versions are very well-known ones. But Tochi Onyebuchi takes Coriolanus, which is certainly, I certainly wouldn't call it one of the most famous Shakespeare plays, and makes the Roman statesman into a hip hop legend. And it's written as not as a classic story necessarily, so much as a series of oral histories where characters are remembering the character. And another atypical one is Kirsten White's version of Romeo and Juliet, called Partying is Such Sweet Sorrow, is done through text. And honestly, I think after reading the story, I'm not going to view Romeo and Juliet the same way again, especially Romeo. It's probably maybe not be necessarily the story that the play tells may not necessarily be as romantic as a lot of people think it is. At least from sort of the Kirsten White perspective of that. So and anyhow, yeah, I think there's a lot there's a lot of really interesting takes, and I think there's room for more takes. Shakespeare wrote a lot of plays that aren't covered in this anthology, his history plays. Henry IV looks at a father and son, and I think that that's something that would do well with a modern version of that story would do well. Othello has a racially mixed couple that faces discrimination, and that's something else that could translate to the modern times. And one of the less known ones, Measure for Measure, definitely has a lot of themes that the Me Too movement is concerned with. And a lot of these stories plays covered could also be covered again. So honestly, if there's a sequel to this one, I think that there's reason to think that there could be a lot of good stuff in that as well. Now you may be thinking, wait a minute, we're just taking stories from Shakespeare? That's not very original. Well, even the most fervent fan of Shakespeare will tell you that Shakespeare himself got most of his plots from books that he had read or plays that he had seen, and just put his own spin on it. And that's what these authors are doing. What's your favorite version of a Shakespeare play, by the way? I'm curious. Or does it sound like something that would be interesting? I'd love to hear from you, your thoughts about this, especially if you read this book. You can put this book on contactless pickup by visiting our website, northbrunswicklibrary.org, or by calling us. Or now we even have limited browsing hours. So if you want to take your chance and see what's here, you could just stop by. Anyways, I'd love to hear from you and your take on this. Thanks for listening, and happy reading.